Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be talking about President Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports.
Oh, yeah. These are going to be interesting.
Yeah, and to help me unpack all of this, I've got an expert here with me today.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to be looking at a CBS News article that kind of breaks down some of the potential impacts. And, I think it's one of those things that maybe doesn't seem super relevant to a lot of people at first, but
Right, until you realize how much we rely on this stuff.
exactly. Like, have you ever stopped to think about how much steel is in your car and how much more it might cost you thanks to these tariffs?
Well, and it's not just cars, right? I mean,
Yeah.
think about appliances, your house even.
Okay, so before we get too far into it, let's make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, good idea.
Can you give us a quick explanation of what a tariff is and how it actually works?
So basically, a tariff is like a tax on goods that are coming in from other countries. So in this case, if someone wants to import steel or aluminum into the U.S., they have to pay an extra 25% on top of whatever the regular price is.
So who ends up paying that extra 25%? Not the importer, right?
No, they just pass that cost down the line. And ultimately, it's the consumer, you and me, who ends up paying more for anything made with that steel or aluminum.
Gotcha. So President Trump's main argument for these tariffs is to protect American manufacturers, right? To
Exactly.
help boost those industries.
Yeah, the idea is that by making imported steel and aluminum more expensive, it's going to encourage people to buy American-made steel and aluminum instead,
Right.
which should lead to more jobs here, more demand, and hopefully a resurgence of U.S. manufacturing.
Okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty, like how much this is really going to affect us.
Yeah, let's talk numbers.
Because I was reading that the average car uses a ton of steel, literally.
It's a lot. Like, on average, we're talking about 1,000 pounds of steel per vehicle.
1,000 pounds.
Yeah, and that steel already costs like somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000.
Whoa, okay, so if you add another 25% on top of that.
You're looking at an extra $1,000 to $1,500 added to the price of a new car.
Wow.
And it's not just cars either, right? Appliances, building materials, anything that uses steel and aluminum could be affected.
And hold on a sec, it's not just imported steel that's going to get more expensive, right? Domestic steel prices could go up too because of this.
Oh, absolutely, because if the foreign competition just got a lot more expensive, American steelmakers can raise their prices too.
That makes sense. All right, so let's talk about the big I word, inflation.
Yeah, everyone's favorite topic.
What are economists saying about how these tariffs could potentially impact prices in general?
They're definitely concerned because, if prices for things like cars and building materials go up, that tends to have a ripple effect.
Yeah, if it costs more to build a house, then the price of the house goes up.
Exactly. And then maybe people can't afford to buy houses or they have to cut back on other spending, and it just kind of spirals from there.
Right. So it's not just about the steel itself. It's about this chain reaction that could lead to higher prices on a whole bunch of things.
And that's when inflation is right. When
Yeah.
prices go up across the board and your money doesn't buy you as much as it used to.
Right. It's like going to the grocery store and everything's suddenly 10% more expensive.
Yeah, that's what economists are worried about. And it's not just speculation either. I mean, Deutsche Bank economists are predicting that these tariffs could lead to like a zero point 0.4 percentage point increase in something called the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index.
Okay, and that's a measure of inflation.
It is.
So basically, we could be looking at everything from groceries to gas to housing, all getting more expensive.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a scary thought for a lot of people, especially
Yeah.
those who are already struggling.
Okay, but before we all go into full-blown panic mode, I do want to point out that not all economists are saying this is going to be a complete disaster.
That's true. Some economists think that these price increases might just be temporary. Yeah, they point to what happened during President Trump's first term when he put tariffs on steel imports.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So what happened was U.S. steel producers ramped up their production, and because there was more steel available, domestically, demand for imported steel went down, and within a year, steel prices actually dropped back down to where they were before the tariffs.
Interesting. So it's not as simple as saying tariffs automatically equal higher prices forever.
No, it's a lot more complicated than that. There are a lot of moving parts.
Well, speaking of complicated, let's talk about the political side of all of this, because the timing of this announcement is pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely raising some eyebrows.
Well, yeah, I mean, inflation is already a big concern for a lot of people, and, these tariffs could potentially make things worse.
Right, especially since that recent CBS News poll found that 2/3 of voters feel like President Trump isn't doing enough to lower prices.
Yeah, so announcing tariffs that could actually make things more expensive might not be the best move politically. It makes you wonder, are tariffs really the best way to help American manufacturing? Are there maybe other ways to do it that wouldn't be so controversial?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's a debate that's been going on forever.
So what are the arguments on both sides? Like, why do some people think tariffs are a good idea?
Well, the people who support tariffs say that they're necessary to protect American jobs and industries.
Okay.
They argue that without tariffs, cheaper goods from other countries would just flood the U.S. market and put American companies out of business.
Right, they wouldn't be able to compete.
Exactly. So they see tariffs as a way to level the playing field and help bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S.
And what about the other side? What are the arguments against using tariffs?
The main argument against tariffs is that they hurt consumers by making prices go up.
Makes sense.
It's like a hidden tax that everyone ends up paying.
Because those costs get passed down to us.
Right. And then there's also the risk of retaliation. If we put tariffs on goods from China, then China might turn around and put tariffs on goods from the U.S.
Oh yeah, like a trade war.
Exactly. And that could end up hurting everyone involved.
So basically, it's this whole complex web of cause and effect.
Yeah, and the critics of tariffs also say that there are better ways to support U.S. manufacturing.
Like what?
Things like investing in research and development, improving infrastructure, maybe offering tax breaks to companies that create jobs in the U.S.
Okay, so more long-term solutions rather than just slapping on a tax.
Right, and also focusing on education and training programs to make sure we have a skilled workforce.
Right, so it sounds like this is one of those issues where there's no easy answer. It's not as simple as saying tariffs are good or bad.
Definitely not. It all depends on the specific situation, the industry, the overall economy.
So it's really about weighing the potential benefits against the potential risks.
Exactly.
So for our listeners out there, what are some things they should keep in mind as this whole thing plays out?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just to be aware of potential price increases.
Yeah, like if you're thinking about buying a new car or a new appliance, it might be worth doing it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, before prices potentially go up.
Right.
And of course, stay informed, keep up with the news, and see how these tariffs actually play out.
And pay attention to how it affects the economy as a whole.
Right. Because this is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
So to keep this puzzle analogy going, is there anything else you think our listeners should be thinking about as they kind of dig deeper into this topic? Any big questions they should be asking themselves?
Yeah, I think the big question here is, if the goal is to bring back U.S. manufacturing and create jobs, are tariffs really the most effective way to do that?
Right.
Or are there, maybe other approaches that might be less costly and less disruptive in the long run? Like, is this the best way to go about it?
That's a great question. And I think it's also important to think about, what are the potential downsides of tariffs? Are those downsides worth the potential benefits? Because
Right.
there's always a trade-off, right?
Exactly. It's not a simple issue. There's a lot to consider.
Well, that's what we try to do here on these deep dives, right? We try to give you the information and the different perspectives so you can start to form your own opinions.
Yeah, it's all about critical thinking and understanding that these issues are complex. There's always more to learn.
Well said. And that's what I love about these deep dives. It's always fascinating to kind of unravel these complex issues and really explore the different possibilities.
Yeah, it's a great conversation.
Well, thanks for joining me on this one. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those brains buzzing, stay curious, and until next time, happy deep diving.